you mentioned that you were depressed, and I was reading an article where you were interviewed, and you said that you were writing in a journal during this period, and the first entry you wrote was, I don't remember being happy, and I don't think I'll ever be happy again. And now you're like the world's guru of happiness. So, in that moment, though, Sean, you had an experience that I think everybody has at some point. I'm not happy, and I don't think I'll ever be happy again. And so, what's the first thing that you would want somebody to know if that's where you are right now?
I think the very first thing I'd want is actually the recognition. Because I kind of wish I had known that earlier, that whole
Mm.
thing we're talking about. 'Cause I think you're right. I think we all have that moment where we realize, I thought I'd be happy when, and then it didn't work. But then if you ask somebody why they're not happy, they'll tell you about one of their externals, right? I'm not happy right now because I don't have a boyfriend. I'm not
Yes.
happy right now because I've got this guy at work, right? I'm not happy right now because I don't have enough money. So I think the very first step might be acknowledging it,
Mm.
that the human brain is designed to foil any attempt that success will guarantee happiness. Because every time you hit one of those targets, we change what we think would create happiness. I think the best example of that is actually the pandemic, because I think at the beginning of it, in the middle of it, everyone thought, think how happy we're going to be when the pandemic wanes.
That's
And the
true.
pandemic is waning, and we don't have that guaranteed levels of happiness. And what we forgot was there wasn't 100% levels of happiness before the pandemic, right? So I think the first is a recognition that this isn't working. From there, I think that it requires a mindset shift and a behavioral shift. Um, in that article and in the work that I do, I research what we can do to create happiness when the world doesn't look like it should. And I think one
Ooh.
important caveat to that is that while I'm talking about what we can do internally, that doesn't negate the need for external changes.
Yes.
We have systemic reasons while there's inequality, discrimination, racism that we should fight. I
Absolutely.
believe what gives us the power to fight that is the internal changes.
Yes.
So, and that everyone needs to do it, not just the people seeking happiness, right? And the people who are being discriminatory need to do it too.
So let's start
But
with the mindset. What
yeah,
is one step, one simple step that somebody who is sitting alone, like Sean, unhappy Sean, back in, the mid 2010s, writing, I don't remember being happy and I don't think I'll ever be happy again. How the hell do you change your mindset? Because if you keep saying that to yourself, you're not going to be able to access happiness within.
right. Well, I think there's something unique in that moment because I was attempting to do something about it because I'm trying to write in a journal to be happier. I'm just like, I don't think this is going to work, which we know from research, you know, that's not a great mentality. Like you can predict the course of treatment based on whether or not you believe the doctor can heal you, right? So that was a not an auspicious place to start.
Okay, so Sean, are you telling us that what you're about to tell us to do is going to work and we should believe in our ability to change our mindset and to take actions and to access happiness?
Yes, I would wholeheartedly say that. Not only because I've experienced myself, but then we've researched it ever since. I mean, what I've learned in this research is that depression was not the end of the story at all. And
Mm.
that even in the midst of a broken world, in fact, only in the midst of a broken world have we ever been able to create happiness. So the question is, how do we do so? I think the starting point is realizing not only that our strategy wasn't working, but acknowledging that there are multiple realities in this moment. And one of them is I don't have a boyfriend or girlfriend, or I don't have this money, or I don't have this job that I want, or I'm frustrated about whatever it is. I think when you acknowledge that that's true, you could say that's one reality, but there's also some other realities as well. Last week, last week I went to the hospital because I was having chest pains.
You
I'm
were?
young, yeah. I was in ER. I missed my very first talk in 2 decades, and I realized in that moment when they strip you of kind of everything, and the doctor's going to knock on the door. When the doctor knocked on the door, I was like, this could change my life. It didn't. I was completely fine. But in that moment, like my whole life changed, right? My whole life could have changed and was completely disrupted within those moments. I think when we realize that there's multiple realities in that moment, one of them is I missed a talk. I'm not with my family. I'm in a hospital I don't want to be in. That's true. On the other hand, I'm going home today, right? I'm going home to two kids that I love and a wife that I love, right? Those are equally true, but in the same reality. And because my brain has a limited amount of resources, I need to choose. And I need to choose what I'm going to be focusing my brain on. There is so much negative in this world that I could spend the entire rest of my life focusing upon that and upon my fear. But that doesn't serve me at all. It's not a valuable reality for me. That in the midst of these multiple and true realities, I'm going to look at the ones that and focus on the ones that are going to allow me to fix the negative parts of my life, or that are at least going to give me the optimism, happiness, and joy to take the next step and the next step. In depression, I just needed a step forward. I felt like I just stopped moving. So I started doing these habits, and these are the habits that we know work. And these are all the things you know about as well, right? Gratitude, for example. And I think that this would be my answer to someone sitting there and to that, that 26-year-old boy who is feeling this, was in those moments, I needed to scan. I need to stop scanning for all the deficits in my life. And I need to use some of those finite resources to scan the world for the things that I was grateful for. And it was hard because my brain kept being like, yes, but what about this? But
Yes.
what about this thing you don't have? Right.
Yes.
So I had to literally train my brain. And we train it exactly like we've seen anything else with the human body, is I had to keep doing it. Right. Like I can't build a bicep if I only lift a weight once, then I'm done. Right. I had to do it every day. And I had to create a pattern out of it, even when I wasn't sure it was going to work. And even when I could see no change in my life. I'd
Uh,
say for the first, easily for the first 2 weeks, I saw no change in my life.
well,
I'm
I
just
want to.
sitting there trying to,
Oh, go
yeah,
ahead. You sorry.
I'm just sitting there writing down things I'm grateful for. And my life still feels terrible. Like I remember breathing hurt when I was depressed because like everything hurt. Like and everything didn't seem like it was worthwhile. I
What
think one
kept
thing
you
that's really
kept
important to
going?
say. So that's the thing. I don't get to talk about this much in any of the interviews. So I'd love to talk about this too, because I think you're going deeper, than some of the surface questions we normally get. The I think that the habits are what pulled me out of depression. I write my gratitudes. I journal. I do exercise. I write a 2 minute kind note almost every day. I'd say 90+% days since my mid 20s. I know that when I don't do those things, it's like when I don't brush my teeth, I get this film in my mouth. That's what I feel like my world looks like when I don't do those habits.
Mm.
Those habits are the building blocks for creating happiness. But the turning point for me, which I never get to talk about, the turning point for me in all of this was actually not me. My job was to make sure other people didn't get depressed. So I kept trying to be there for other people. I was just supposed to be this paragon of, of knowing what you're supposed to do and optimism, right? And I kept going deeper and deeper in depression because I knew that there is a dissonance between what I was feeling and what I was showing to the world. The turning point for me and what actually got me to try to do those habits was at the bottom of the depression for me. I turned to my 8 closest friends and family and told them that I was going through depression. And a couple of these people were sort of my competitors there at Harvard, right, or my peers. And I told them I was going through depression. I said it's genetic. There's nothing you can do. My grandmother, grandparents, like it's genetic. I just wanted to tell somebody. But immediately the groundswell of support was phenomenal. They kept calling me. They emailed me. They met up with me. One of them brought me cupcakes. It's not what I did it, to get cupcakes. But as soon as I did that, everything changed. And the reason for it was actually a study I found way later in my life. It was a study by these 2 researchers in Virginia, and they found that if you look at a hill you need to climb in front of you, if you look at that hill by yourself, your brain shows you a picture of a hill that looks 20 to 30% steeper when you're alone compared to that hill that you look at of the same height while standing next to someone who you're told is going to climb the hill with you. So I said that in a convoluted way. When you're alone, hills actually look 20 to 30% steeper to the visual cortex, which
Wow.
is amazing because I thought we have this objective view of the world, right? That's bad. This is good. This is how tall that mountain is. And what we realized was it was one of those matrix moments where I realized that the world is not objective, it's subjective. And that hill, those challenges are collapsing and expanding based upon whether or not you think you're radically alone going through this and trying to get out of this, or whether you're with other people. So as soon as I did that, as soon as I opened up to other people, that was the turning point because it was the move from happiness as a self-help idea to this recognition that happiness was not an individual sport at all. And suddenly that hill of overcoming depression in front of me dropped by 20 to 30%. And they opened up about things they were dealing with. None of them was depression, but it was just challenges they were experiencing. And we started creating these meaningful narratives and social bonds that made me want to do the habits because there was something worth doing the habits for.
Hmm.
So it was a combination of habits and social connection and a mindset shift that allowed in that moment to break from this idea that nothing matters and that there's nothing that I can do that matters and that I have to just wait for the world to change.
Well, it makes perfect sense. And it reminds me of the fact that the Surgeon General just had that op ed piece that went viral yesterday about the epidemic of loneliness. And in his op ed piece in the New York Times, he talked about his own struggle with it and how the turning point was him admitting, just like you did, to his college, to his family friends, and to a few colleagues that he was really struggling with this. And it was their checking in on him and them sharing back that they felt disconnected from social groups and from themselves as well after the last 3 years that really was the turning point. But I love that you added that research because it is true. When you are down and sad and you feel like a sad sack that nobody wants to hang out with, that's the story you tell yourself. And that story then and the emotions that feel low make you keep isolating. And it's when you reach out that you change the behavior and you change the narrative. And then that provides a little bit of that intrinsic lift that you need, that maybe there is something I can do. Maybe there is hope. I want to go a little bit deeper on this because you've been there and I've been there and lots of people listening have been there and are there right now. And so when somebody like you come in or I'm sitting here on the mic, it's so easy to be resigned and like push everybody away and be like, well, that's great for you, Sean, but you don't know what I'm going through. And I think this question, Andrea, it's actually number 3. It's Charmaine. Let's play Charmaine's question because I think it's going to help us even go a little bit deeper to provide some hope, Sean, for somebody who's really feeling like I've tried everything.
Since my teen years, I've been asking myself, why am I here? What's my purpose? How do I create happiness within myself? I've made so much progress. Yet, right now I feel lost. I feel like a failure. I feel not good enough. I feel like I'm not a good girl. I feel like I'm not a good enough mom to my daughters. I feel selfish. I feel off course and like I'm not living up to my potential. I've done the work. I know this is coming from my limiting beliefs, trauma, projections that I have taken on as truth. Yet, here I am, feeling lost, alone, and frankly stupid. I do understand the privilege I possess. I practice gratitude. I know I am blessed. And I do a lot of things right. I don't think I'm depressed. I'm not completely unhappy. So what the fuck am I? I'm in some goddamn vortex of nirvana and hell.
Sean, what pops out at
Wow.
you?
So many things. First of all, how self-aware this person is, right? To be able, in the midst of this, to be able to identify the stages that they've been through, where they are currently, a recognition of the good, but also feeling like that they don't feel good enough and that there's more potential. What I kept hearing in my head over and over again is, this sounds like me. This sounds so human. I think we fluctuate all the time between this, like, I've got things going, and then, wow, I certainly don't. Like, if I have a really productive Monday, I get everything done and I'm super cleaning the house. Tuesday and Wednesday are terrible. Like, I'm exhausted. I don't want to do anything. I feel like I waste every Tuesday and Wednesday whenever I have an amazing Monday. Um, I think that that's because we swing, right? And I
Mm.
think what our hunger for is, um, if our hunger is for a mountaintop experience all the time, that we always know that we're loved, that we're always amazing, that we're always beautiful and the smartest person in the room, I think that that's an illusion and a false desire because I think it's an accurate reflection that we are not living up to our potential. I think that that's true all the time. I think that I could be doing better as a dad. I could be doing better as a husband, I know that when I work really hard at being a great dad, I know I immediately look around at all the people where they're doing amazing things at work, and I'm like, whoa, I'm so behind. Then when I do a ton of stuff for work or travel ever, then I'm like, oh, I should be a better dad, right? I swing back and forth between this. And I think what we need are those anchor points in the midst of it.
Hmm.
So if what and where those anchor points come from, um, you had me on the show or to join you because I researched this, but I also went to the divinity school before getting into this. So what motivated my beliefs in why positive psychology mattered came from this belief that um, the story we tell ourselves and the lens through which we view the world changes how we act in it and where we find our meaning and where we find that value. And I think that those narratives, those belief systems, can answer some of those questions about how can I feel loved even when I'm not achieving my highest, right, or my potential. I think in the world that's very difficult because then we get on Instagram and we know exactly who's doing great, based upon likes, right, or based upon some sort of quantification, or money can tell you who's doing great and who's not, and none of those fill that void. So where those anchor points could come from, I think that they have to come from other people as well. There was a study that came out of Stanford that found that loneliness had nothing to do with actually the number of people within your life. Loneliness was simply the absence of meaning you felt in the relationships with other people and their meaningful impact upon you. That if you weren't doing anything meaningful for other people's lives, then you didn't feel social connection for the people that are around you all the time, right? And vice versa. So if that's the case, if meaning is what's driving our levels of happiness, then I think my grandmother's said it, she's like, if you want to be a friend, if you want a friend, you have to be a friend. And I was like, okay, that's overly simplistic. And I
Not
also want a
really,
girlfriend,
actually.
right? That's not working out for me. I can't be the girlfriend, right? So I, in that moment, like I didn't understand. Now I get it. What we're finding is that when people are experiencing that fluctuation back and forth, I think we're searching for meaning, and people search it for in different ways: religion and philosophy and psychology. Um, I think that a lot of the things that we search for don't work out for us, which is why we get to the point where she's talking about where we feel this vortex of I've got it, I don't have it, got it, I don't have it, because we're reaching onto things oftentimes that are illusory while we're grabbing onto things that are true. Um, my mentor Tal Ben Shahar said that you're never as great as you think you are, and you're never as bad as you think you are. And what I
Mm.
loved about that is that meant that there was a middle path in the midst of it, right? That sometimes when I think I'm a great speaker or whatever it is, then I get humbled very quickly by anything, right? Or if I think that I'm not doing great, then occasionally I'll get an email and it's like, hey, this was really important to me, right? That middle path was actually the one that I wanted to be in. And it's this recognition and being okay with, I am not at my full potential, but that's okay. And the reason that's okay is because I'm having a meaningful impact upon other people. So that habit that I mentioned of writing a 2-minute positive email praising or thanking someone else, I found that one to be probably the most helpful of any of the things that I've researched, because you can take someone in a socially isolated state with high levels of introversion, and if every day they scan for one new person to write a 2-minute positive email to, they stop on day 8 unless we pay them $15. On day 8, that's when they realize fully that they're not a crazy extrovert with all these friends that they could write to. They're like, I wrote to everyone on my favorites list and my mom twice. That's everyone. And then they scan and they remember, who's that mentor who got me into this job? Or who's that high school teacher that seemed to have some answer to some of those questions that that person was just asking? Or what about my kid's first grade teacher who transformed my son's life, but I don't talk to them anymore
Mm.
because my kid's in second grade.
Right.
And you start to see all these people that are in our lives that we're not connecting with. And a 2-minute email thanking them or praising them or saying, I've seen how you've been going through breast cancer, and it inspires me that you're able to find happiness in low health when, I struggle to find happiness when, I seem to have higher health, right? That those moments, that just brief, meaningful act using technology for 2 minutes, we found that if you do it for 21 days in a row, your social connection score rises up to the top 15% of people worldwide, right? That's including extroverts, right? And what we found was that it was you were lighting up these nodes of meaningful connections on your mental map of social connection. And that, I think, if you look at the philosophers, I think if you look at religion, I think if you look at psychology, they keep breaking down this idea that you can achieve happiness alone, that you could just figure out your thoughts enough and then you did it. You can just maintain your happiness. That happiness and meaning only come from this interplay with the ecosystem, with others around us.
I love
And
that.
there's this,
I want
yeah.
to go ahead. Or if you're about to talk another study, go for it.
Oh, I was just gonna tell one quick study. It's a
Please.
beautiful one. It's not about humans. You probably heard this one. This was also in the New York Times as well. They had there's a study where they found all these fireflies. Fireflies everywhere light up individually and randomly in the dark, and that's how they attract a mate. And their success rate per night per bug is 3%, which I'm told is good. But these researchers found on opposite sides of the globe these two species, one in Southeast Indonesia and one in the Smoky Mountains of Tennessee that you can take buses out to go see. And these fireflies have these neurotransmitters that allow them to all light up and all go dark at the same time, which is beautiful, but not that smart because we live in a survival of the fittest world, right? We're told be the fastest, smartest, brightest light shining, otherwise you'll never be successful. And at MIT, they studied these fireflies and they realized we just understand how systems work. That when they lit up together, seemingly with their competition, the success rate doesn't drop. The success rate goes from 3% to 82% per bug. It's not like one bug does better. The whole system was doing orders of magnitude better than we thought was possible because as they lit up together, their light became brighter and it was attracting more and more potential mates than a single light would have been able to do and create these virtuous cycles. And we kept seeing the same thing when we looked at humans. We found that the greatest predictor of long-term levels of happiness, as you know, one of the greatest predictors is social connection.
Mm-hmm.
It's the breadth, depth, and meaning in your social relationships. So it's not something you could figure out in your head, and then you did it, and then you can hold happiness forever. It's about finding a way of lighting up with other people and getting them to light up as well.
So, Sean, what I love about what you just said, especially in response to that question from Charmaine, is that I was listening to her just tick off one negative, nasty, critical thought after another. I could feel like this heaviness. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, wait a minute. I bet happiness is broken into two things. It is from the neck up, and it's the things that you tell yourself. But it is also, and probably way more important, that you think about the things that you're doing from the neck down. And that's where these habits come in. That if it's all doom and gloom from the neck up, you're not going to feel any sort of motivation, hope, or interest in lighting up with everybody else. But if you can force yourself to start ticking off these simple habits that you recommend, that you practice, that you've researched, and you just highlighted the one of taking and making a 2-minute note, just a 2-minute note every single day for 21 days, it will have an impact in how you feel, which of course will start to shift all that shit you've been saying to yourself, which probably is stuff that you heard your parents say to themselves. And so what I love about your research is that you're also making it actionable, because I think that's part of the problem, that when we feel shitty and we say shitty things to ourselves, we don't take the actions that actually change it.
Hmm. I heard one time I was on a plane and the woman sitting, I don't know, kitty corner behind me and, to the back, she said she was talking to somebody else loudly that she had just met about all these psychological understandings about herself, like literally a litany of all the psychological problems that she had. And I realized she said she'd been going to therapy for years. She had this incredible knowledge about herself and understanding where she was. And it didn't, at no point did she ever mention anything she was doing about it. Right. She was talking to a stranger about it. Right. Which, was more trauma dumping than actually trying to move forward. But I think there's this moment where I really thought that if I read enough books that I'd find happiness, right? I thought if I read enough books, I'd be smart and then people would like me. That was completely not true, right? And I think that we take these paths, and I love what you're saying there is that there's this interplay between the beliefs and the actions that we do. You see the same thing with religion, right? Between this faith and works, right? Like it's the things you believe, but if you say you believe those, but you're not doing any of those, I'm not sure you actually believe these things, right? That there's got to be a connection between those. And what I would say is, in addition to that, is don't try to do it alone, right? I think that we treat happiness like self-help. Like I know our books are in self-help sections sometimes, right? But as soon as we do this on our own, without that friend, without that mentor, without those people that we're doing meaningful acts for, then we get frustrated very quickly and think we're doing something wrong. And what's wrong is actually the formula. Like happiness never works out if it's an individual pursuit. And that's
love
one of those
that.
other mindset shifts I think was crucial to find, that there wasn't, you can't do enough yoga to force yourself into happiness unless that yoga causes you to be more peaceful with that interaction with your mother-in-law.
Are you ready to put your happiness hat on? What if I told you that we have the OG of happiness research? So many of you are writing and you're struggling with happiness. And what Sean says and what he teaches on stages around the world is that you and I have happiness all wrong. The definition is wrong. That's part of the problem.